Everyone in this room knows the price of power, but nobody knows the value of a woman who cannot be bought. The words were quiet, but they stopped the entire room. Vincent Romano had built his empire on influence, respect, and the belief that everything in life had a number attached to it. A rare painting had a price. A luxury apartment had a price. A business deal had a price. Even loyalty, in his world, was something people tried to purchase. But on that evening, inside the glass-walled penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Vincent discovered something he had never encountered before. Someone who simply said no. The room was filled with people who had spent years trying to earn the Mafia Boss's approval. Executives in tailored suits stood near the marble table. Assistants quietly carried documents, and everyone watched as the man known for controlling every conversation placed a black folder in front of Emily Carter. Inside was an offer worth $10 million. $10 million was more money than most people would see in a lifetime. It could erase debts, change futures, and open doors that had always remained locked. Everyone expected Emily to be overwhelmed. Everyone expected gratitude. Everyone expected her signature. But Emily did not reach for the pen. She looked at the folder, then at Vincent, and the calm expression on her face was something nobody in that room understood. She was not angry. She was not afraid. She was simply certain. Emily Carter had spent years being underestimated. People saw her curvy figure before they saw her intelligence. They noticed her simple clothes before they noticed her determination. They judged her by appearances before learning the strength behind her quiet confidence. She knew what it felt like when people decided her worth before hearing her voice. And that was exactly why the offer in front of her felt different. It was not just money. It was a test. Vincent watched closely as Emily slowly pushed the folder back across the table. The movement was gentle, but the meaning behind it changed the atmosphere instantly. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even whispered. The most powerful man in the room had just heard the one answer he never expected. No. Vincent studied her carefully. He had met countless people who wanted something from him. They wanted opportunities, connections, protection, and access to a world they could never reach alone. But Emily wanted none of those things. For the first time in years, someone was standing in front of him without trying to gain anything. And strangely, that was the thing that caught his attention the most. Emily did not know it yet, but that simple refusal would become the moment that changed everything. Because Vincent Romano had spent his entire life believing that power was the answer to every problem. That night, a woman everyone underestimated showed him that the most valuable things in life were the ones money could never purchase. The room stayed silent as Vincent looked at the woman who had just rejected his greatest offer, and for the first time, he had no idea what to say next. The silence after Emily Carter walked away from the table felt heavier than any argument Vincent Romano had ever faced. For several seconds, nobody moved. The executives who had gathered inside the Manhattan penthouse kept their eyes lowered, unsure whether they had just witnessed a mistake or something far more unusual. They had seen people negotiate with Vincent before. They had watched powerful individuals carefully choose every word around him. But they had never seen someone turn down an opportunity that could change their entire life. Vincent remained standing near the marble table, looking at the folder Emily had pushed back toward him. $10 million was supposed to represent security, freedom, and a new beginning. Yet Emily had looked at it as if it represented something else entirely. A question, a challenge, a reminder that some people still believe their worth was greater than any amount written on a check. Hours later, Vincent found himself thinking about that moment. He sat alone in his private office, surrounded by the same luxury that had always defined his life. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights below. A collection of awards and rare artwork filled the room. Everything around him represented success. Everything. Except the one thing he had never been able to obtain. Genuine trust. Vincent had spent years watching people change when money entered the conversation. A simple offer could turn hesitation into agreement. A generous payment could transform uncertainty into loyalty. That was the world he understood. But Emily Carter did not follow those rules. The next morning, Vincent asked his assistant to bring him information about her. Not because he was angry. Not because he wanted to pressure her. Something about Emily had created a question he could not ignore. Who was the woman who looked at $10 million and saw something more important than wealth? The answer surprised him. Emily lived a simple life in a small apartment outside the city. She worked hard, paid her own bills, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that did not depend on expensive clothes or a powerful name. People often noticed her appearance first, but those who knew her understood there was much more beneath the surface. She was thoughtful, patient, and determined. She had built her life through effort, not shortcuts. Vincent read through the details and paused when he reached one particular note. Emily had turned down opportunities before when they required her to compromise her values. She had walked away from easier paths because she believed respect meant nothing if it came without choice. For the first time, Vincent realized the $10 million offer had never been the most interesting part of their meeting. The interesting part was the person who refused it. Most people tried to enter Vincent Romano's world by asking what he could give them. Emily Carter had entered his world by showing him what he was missing, and that realization stayed with him longer than he expected. Because for a man who believed he had everything, meeting someone who wanted nothing from him felt like discovering a door he had never known existed. Emily Carter had no idea that a single decision inside a Manhattan penthouse had captured the attention of the one man everyone else tried to impress. To her, walking away from Vincent Romano's offer was not a dramatic moment. It was simply the only choice she could make while staying true to herself. The next morning, Emily returned to her ordinary routine. Her small apartment was quiet except for the sound of the coffee maker filling the kitchen with warmth. There were no marble floors, no private elevators, and no expensive decorations surrounding her. But there was something she valued more than luxury. There was peace. Emily had learned a long time ago that a comfortable life was not always the same as a meaningful one. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, especially because of the way people judged her appearance before taking the time to understand her heart. Some people saw a curvy woman and immediately created a story about her. They assumed she was less ambitious, less capable, or less confident. Emily had spent years proving that those assumptions were wrong, not with anger, but with consistency. She showed up. She worked hard. She treated people with kindness even when others did not offer her the same respect. Across the city, Vincent Romano continued studying the information about her. He expected to find a hidden reason behind her refusal. He expected debt, desperation, or some secret motivation that explained why someone would reject such a life-changing offer. But the more he learned, the more confused he became. There was no hidden agenda, no attempt to gain attention, no desire to use his name or influence. Emily simply believed that some things were worth more than money. That idea stayed with Vincent throughout the day. He had built his reputation around control and certainty. Decisions were usually simple. Someone wanted something, and he found a way to provide it. But Emily had introduced a possibility he had never considered. What if the most valuable people were not the ones asking for something? What if they were the ones who could walk away? Later that afternoon, Vincent arranged a meeting with Emily at a quiet cafe away from the attention of his usual world. When she arrived, she looked exactly as he remembered. Calm, composed, completely comfortable being herself. She did not arrive expecting an apology or another offer. She simply sat across from him and waited. I wanted to understand something, Vincent said. Emily looked at him carefully. What? Why did you refuse? For a moment, the city noise outside seemed to disappear. Emily looked through the window before answering. Because I did not want my life to change because someone decided my value had a price. Those words stayed with Vincent. Not because they offended him, but because they challenged everything he thought he knew. For the first time, he was not looking at Emily as someone different from him. He was looking at her as someone who possessed something he had spent years searching for, a sense of self that no amount of money could create. Vincent Romano had spent years building a world where every decision had a purpose, every conversation had an outcome, and every person around him understood the power of his name. But after meeting Emily Carter, he found himself facing something far more complicated than any business negotiation. He was facing a person who did not want anything from him. In the days that followed their conversation at the cafe, Vincent found himself remembering the way Emily spoke. She had not tried to impress him. She had not changed her words because of his reputation. She simply told the truth, and somehow that honesty stayed with him longer than any compliment ever had. For someone who had spent most of his life surrounded by people carefully choosing what they said, Emily's straightforward nature felt unfamiliar. It was not disrespectful. It was not careless. It was simply real. Meanwhile, Emily continued living her life the way she always had. She returned to work, helped her neighbors when she could, and focused on the responsibilities she carried every day. She did not think about Vincent constantly. She did not wonder about his wealth or influence. To her, he was simply a man who had offered something she did not want and had listened when she explained why. That alone surprised her. Most people in Vincent's position would have been offended by rejection. But Vincent had done something unexpected. He listened. 1 week later, Emily received an invitation to meet Vincent again. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another attempt to change her mind. But when she arrived at his office, she noticed something different. There was no contract waiting on the table, no expensive gift, no impressive display meant to convince her. Just 2 chairs, a quiet room, and Vincent sitting across from her. "I owe you an explanation," he said. Emily looked surprised. She had not expected those words from someone like him. Vincent admitted that he had spent years believing money solved problems because, in his experience, it usually did. But her refusal made him question that belief. "You were the first person who looked at what I could give and decided it was not what you needed," he said. Emily remained silent for a moment before answering. Maybe because people are not supposed to be measured by what they can receive. The sentence was simple, but Vincent felt its weight. He realized Emily had never been trying to prove she was better than him. She was only protecting the one thing she had always owned completely, her choices. As their conversation continued, Vincent began seeing the person behind the quiet confidence. Emily had faced difficult moments, but she never allowed those experiences to make her bitter. She believed kindness was a strength, not a weakness. She believed respect should come before admiration. And she believed that a person's value existed long before anyone else recognized it. For the first time in a long time, Vincent was not trying to make someone enter his world. He was trying to understand theirs. And that small change in perspective was the beginning of something neither of them expected. For the first time in years, Vincent Romano was beginning to understand that the greatest changes in life did not always arrive through power or influence. Sometimes, they arrived through a quiet conversation with someone who had nothing to prove. After their meeting, Vincent noticed small details he had ignored before. The way Emily Carter thanked people who rarely received appreciation. The way she treated everyone with the same respect, whether they had an important title or not. The way she carried herself with confidence even when others tried to make her feel invisible. Those details stayed in his mind because they were completely different from the world he knew. Vincent had spent years surrounded by people who measured success through possessions, connections, and status. Emily measured it through character. That difference began changing the way he saw her. It also changed the way he saw himself. Meanwhile, Emily was still cautious. She understood that Vincent was a powerful man with a life completely different from hers. She respected the fact that he had shown a willingness to listen, but she did not forget who he was. Trust was not something that appeared because of one conversation. Trust was earned through consistent actions. Vincent seemed to understand that. He stopped trying to impress her with what he owned and started showing interest in who she was. One afternoon, he invited Emily to visit a community center where he had quietly supported local programs for years. Emily expected to see another display of wealth, another reminder of the world he came from. Instead, she saw something unexpected. She saw children receiving support, families finding opportunities, and people who genuinely appreciated the help they had received. Vincent did not stand in the spotlight. He did not look for praise. He simply observed. Emily noticed the difference immediately. "You do not tell people about this," she said. Vincent looked at her and answered honestly, "Not everything valuable needs an audience." The response surprised her because it revealed a side of him she had not seen before. Beneath the reputation, beneath the confidence, there was a person who understood more than people realized. But Vincent also began facing a difficult truth. He had spent so much time believing that providing something was the same as caring about someone. Emily showed him that real connection was different. It was not about giving someone a better life because you thought they needed saving. It was about respecting their ability to choose their own path. Later that evening, Vincent and Emily stood outside the building, watching the city lights reflect across the streets below. For a moment, there was no difference between their worlds. No billionaire and no ordinary woman. No powerful figure and no person others underestimated. Just 2 people having an honest conversation. Vincent finally understood why Emily had rejected his offer. She was not rejecting him. She was protecting the part of herself that made her who she was. And that was the very thing that made him want to know her even more. The days that followed changed something neither Vincent Romano nor Emily Carter expected. Their conversations became less about what separated them and more about what they could learn from each other. Vincent began noticing that Emily never measured people by their achievements or possessions. She remembered names, listened carefully, and treated every person with the same quiet respect. To her, a person's importance was never determined by the size of their home or the number in their bank account. It was determined by the way they treated others when there was nothing to gain. That idea was simple, but for Vincent, it was completely different from the world he had known. However, not everyone around Vincent understood the change happening inside him. Some people in his circle believed Emily was only interested in getting closer to his world. They could not imagine that someone would spend time with Vincent without wanting something in return. One evening, during a private gathering at a luxurious Manhattan restaurant, Emily experienced exactly what Vincent had been trying to understand. The room was filled with influential guests, people who were used to being admired and respected. When Emily arrived with Vincent, several conversations became quieter. A few guests looked at her with curiosity, trying to understand why someone so different from their usual circle was standing beside him. Emily noticed the reactions, but she remained calm. She had faced judgment before. She knew that some people formed opinions before learning the truth. One guest made a careless comment about how unusual it was for someone like Emily to be included in their world. The words were not loud, but they carried enough meaning to reveal the assumption behind them. Emily simply looked at the person and smiled politely. She did not argue. She did not try to prove herself. She had learned that dignity did not require permission from anyone else. Vincent noticed everything. In the past, he might have responded immediately because he was used to controlling situations. But this time he waited. He wanted to see how Emily would handle the moment. And what he saw surprised him. Emily did not need him to speak for her. She did not need his influence to create respect. Her confidence came from somewhere deeper. Later, when they stepped away from the crowd, Vincent asked her how she remained so calm. Emily looked at him and said, "Because I know who I am. Other people's opinions do not decide that." Those words stayed with him. Vincent realized that Emily possessed something many powerful people spent their entire lives searching for. She was comfortable with herself. She did not need approval from strangers, and she did not need wealth to feel valuable. That night, Vincent understood that his interest in Emily was not because she was different from his world. It was because she reminded him there was a world beyond his. A world built not on status or control, but on honesty, kindness, and respect. And for the first time, Vincent Romano wanted to protect something he could not own. Vincent Romano had spent years building a reputation that made people carefully choose their words around him. His presence alone was enough to change the atmosphere of a room. People respected his decisions, followed his instructions, and rarely questioned the way he handled situations. But Emily Carter had quietly changed something inside him. She had shown him that respect was not created through fear or influence. It was created through understanding. And now Vincent faced a choice that revealed how much he had truly changed. The moment came during another private event in Manhattan, where several important guests had gathered to discuss future opportunities. Emily was there because Vincent had invited her, not as a symbol of status, but because he genuinely valued her perspective. As the evening continued, one conversation caught everyone's attention. A guest who had known Vincent for years suggested that Emily did not belong in their circle. The comment was subtle, hidden behind a polite smile, but the message was clear. They believed Emily was only there because of Vincent. They believed her place depended on his approval. In the past, Vincent would have immediately taken control of the situation. He would have made sure everyone understood the consequences of disrespecting someone under his protection. But this time, he did something different. He looked at Emily first. He wanted to know what she wanted, not what he wanted to do. Emily noticed that small gesture. It showed her that Vincent was no longer trying to solve every problem with authority. He was learning to listen. Before Emily could respond, Vincent calmly addressed the room. His voice was steady, but his message was clear. He explained that Emily was not there because of him. She was there because she had earned her place through her character, intelligence, and the way she treated people. The room became quiet. The same people who had judged her moments earlier now saw something they had not expected. Vincent Romano, a man known for control, was not defending Emily because he thought she was weak. He was respecting her because he knew she was strong. Emily looked at him with surprise. She understood the importance of what he had done. He had not spoken over her. He had not tried to make her feel like she needed saving. He had simply made sure others recognized what he already knew. Her value was never connected to his name. Later that night, Vincent and Emily walked through the quiet streets outside the building. The city lights reflected across the sidewalks as they talked about everything that had changed between them. Vincent admitted that he used to believe giving people what they wanted was the same as caring about them. Emily told him that caring meant seeing someone as they truly were, not as a possession, not as an opportunity, but as a person. Vincent looked at her and realized that the woman who once rejected his greatest offer had given him something far more valuable. She had given him a different way to see the world. And for the first time, Vincent Romano chose respect over control. Emily Carter never expected that a simple refusal would change the life of a man like Vincent Romano. She had believed their first meeting would become nothing more than a brief moment between two people from completely different worlds. But every conversation, every quiet gesture, and every unexpected act of respect had slowly created a connection neither of them planned. Vincent was no longer the man who believed every problem had a solution hidden behind money. He was learning that some things required patience, trust, and the willingness to understand another person. Emily noticed the difference. She saw it in the way he asked questions instead of giving instructions. She saw it in the way he listened without waiting for his turn to speak. The man who once controlled every room was beginning to understand the importance of simply being present. But change was never easy, especially for someone who had spent years living by a certain set of rules. Vincent's old world still surrounded him. Many people respected him because of his influence, but very few truly knew him. They knew the successful businessman, the powerful figure, and the person who always seemed impossible to challenge. They did not know the man who wondered whether he had spent too much of his life chasing control and not enough time building genuine relationships. Emily was the first person who made him ask that question. One evening, Vincent invited Emily to a quiet dinner away from the usual attention that followed him. There were no important guests, no business discussions, and no expectations. Just a simple table, a calm atmosphere, and two people having an honest conversation. Vincent looked across the table and admitted something he had never said before. I thought having everything meant never needing anyone. Emily listened carefully before answering. Maybe having everything means knowing what truly matters. Her words stayed with him. Vincent realized that for years he had focused on protecting what he owned, but he had never considered what it meant to be understood. Emily did not see him as a name, a reputation, or a symbol of success. She saw him as a person. That was something money had never been able to provide. As the evening continued, Vincent shared parts of his life that he rarely discussed, not because Emily demanded answers, but because she created a space where honesty felt natural. She never judged him for the choices he had made. She simply reminded him that people could always choose a better direction. For Emily, kindness was not about changing someone overnight. It was about showing them that they were capable of becoming more. Vincent looked at her and understood the truth he had been avoiding. Emily had never wanted his wealth. She had never wanted his influence. She had wanted to be respected as an equal. And that was the one thing he had finally learned to give. In that moment, Vincent realized the greatest change in his life was not that someone entered his world. It was that someone finally taught him how to see beyond it. Months after the night, when everything began to change, Vincent Romano was no longer the same man people thought they knew. The city still recognized his name. People still respected his achievements and the influence he carried. But those closest to him noticed something different. The person who once measured success through control had learned the importance of connection. The man who once believed every problem could be solved with money had discovered that the most meaningful things in life could not be purchased. And the person who showed him that truth was Emily Carter. Emily never tried to change Vincent into someone else. She never asked him to forget his past or pretend to be a different person. Instead, she reminded him that every person had the ability to choose what kind of future they wanted to create. That lesson stayed with him. Over time, Vincent began making decisions differently. He listened more carefully. He valued people for their character rather than their position. He learned that respect was not something demanded from others. It was something earned through actions. Emily also changed in ways she never expected. The woman who once believed she had to prove her worth to the world began seeing herself through a different perspective. She realized that the qualities she had always carried, her kindness, her determination, and her confidence, were never weaknesses. They were the very things that made her remarkable. Their worlds were still different. Vincent lived among opportunities Emily had never imagined, while Emily remained connected to the simple values that had guided her entire life. But those differences no longer created distance between them. Instead, they became the reason they understood each other so well. One afternoon, Vincent returned to the same office where Emily had once rejected his offer. The room looked exactly the same. The marble table, the city view, and the quiet atmosphere remained unchanged. But Vincent was different. He looked at the place where he had placed that folder months earlier and remembered the moment that changed his perspective forever. He remembered expecting an agreement and receiving something far more valuable instead. A lesson. Emily entered the room, and Vincent smiled. Not the confident expression people expected from him, but a genuine smile from someone who had finally learned the difference between having everything and appreciating what truly matters. "Do you ever regret saying no that day?" he asked. Emily looked around the room before answering. "No, because if I had said yes, I would have received money. But saying no helped me discover something much more important." Vincent looked at her curiously. "What was that?" Emily smiled softly. "That my value was never something someone else could give me." The room became quiet. Vincent understood. The greatest gift Emily had given him was not a relationship, not a different way of living, and not a new perspective alone. She had given him the chance to become someone who understood that dignity, kindness, and respect were more powerful than any fortune. And that day, the world remembered that the strongest person was not the one who could buy anything they wanted. It was the person who knew their worth before anyone else recognized it.